All right, we are back. You're listening to Sports Talk with Puckett and Pontzer. You can follow us on Twitter, myself at Austin Puckett, Tim at Timothy_Pontzer, and you can like our Facebook page, Sports Talk with Puckett and Pontzer, and you can access our YouTube account and listen to our podcasts of prior shows through that.
And you can visit the station at wxou.org and follow them on Twitter at wxou.
Correct. But we're going to get into the rest of the NHL playoffs. We just broke down the Red Wings for a solid 35 minutes. And
well, you got to give them a proper send-off.
Right.
Because
it's a big story. We've been talking about it for
unfortunately.
weeks. So, that was probably the last major segment that they'll get in our show for a while. So, yeah, I mean, it was necessary. But we're going to get into the rest of the NHL playoffs now. Pittsburgh and Boston are in the Eastern Conference Finals, and Chicago and Los Angeles are in the Western Conference Finals. So a couple good matchups there. 2 original 6 teams.
And then 2 kind of hip, cool to cheer for teams.
Right. But yeah, we can start with... Well, let's start with the Western Conference first, because we were talking about the Wings, and then we got to save Pittsburgh for last because that's Tim's boys. So Chicago and LA, I think that... the key matchup to watch for that is going to be obviously Jonathan Quick and Corey Crawford.
Absolutely.
Jonathan Quick's better, obviously. I think he's the best goalie in the game right now, so I don't think anybody was better than him. But Jonathan Quick has a 1.5 goals against average, a 948 save percentage, and he has 8 wins in the playoffs.
Right. He watch some of those San Jose games. He kind of single-handedly won a lot of it, especially at the end of the series. I mean, for a funny-looking guy, he really stepped up and was the reason they won because San Jose matched up really well with them. A division rival, a local rival. Great series, 7 games as well. And unlike last year, the Kings didn't exactly have some of the offensive firepower like they did last year, but Jonathan Quick is the reason that they're a series away from going to defend their title.
Right, and I mean some of the numbers that he posted in the game in the games versus San Jose. I mean, he pitches at least, I think, if there's 2 shutouts, he never gives up more than 2 goals in a game, which is just ridiculous. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. He's the best goalie in the game, hands down, in my mind. And I don't think Corey Crawford has really any chance of outplaying him in this series. So it's going to be heavily reliant upon the Chicago Blackhawks' skill and their offensive firepower. And Jonathan Toews can't melt down like he did against the Red Wings.
No, and that's Corey Crawford didn't exactly have the strongest series against the Red Wings
At all.
He didn't make too many egregious mistakes, but he didn't exactly just shine either. And the Blackhawks, you're absolutely right. When we were talking about this with the Wings, when their stars stepped up, they did well, and they should because they're a deep, talented team. You look at the LA. They have a couple guys. They have 2 former Flyers, and Mike Richards and Jeff Carter, that lead them in points with 10 and 8 respectively. And then it's kind of a drop-off. You have a couple guys with 7, 6, 5, and then the rest are like 3, 2s, and 1s. They have a guy like Anze Kopitar who has 7. You've got a guy in Dustin Brown, their captain. He only has 4 points. But like Mike Richards on that top line, he's a +5. He's stepping up. But some of these other guys, aren't making aren't making as big of an impact, and they're solid on the defensive side. You guys with like Dwight Keane, a former Penguin, one of my favorites, and Rob Scuderi. He actually has a +6, which is terrific for a defenseman. And those are guys that are going to have to step up. They're going to have their stars as well. But I think ultimately, and it's easy to say this, but I think it comes down to the goalies. And when if Quick can outplay Crawford over a 6 or 7 game series, I think there's a really good chance that the Kings can come out on top.
Yeah, I would pick the Kings simply because Jonathan Quick. If we're just going to cut to the chase and make the pick. The Blackhawks were highly touted as the best team in hockey going into the playoffs. They win the President's Cup, and they're flying high. They beat the Wild in 5 games, and then all of a sudden they're down 3-1 to the Wings. They make the comeback, but nobody's as confident in them as they were to start the season. And Jonathan Quick didn't have as good of a regular season as some expected, but he flipped that switch when the playoffs came on.
Pulling a Johan Franz.
He's played maybe better than he did last year.
I would agree,
which
yeah.
is unbelievable.
Saying something, absolutely.
And I think that I have to pick the Kings, and
Right.
I'm gonna pick them in 6.
See, I think I'm gonna mirror that pick as well, because I not that I really want to, but I was gonna really lean to the Blackhawks. You know, they're the number 1 seed for a reason, the top team in the league for a reason. But watching the series with the Wings kind of worries me if I'm a Blackhawks fan, because they're a team that feels like they have this like switch that they can kind of just flip on and off, and you do that against a team like the Wings, and I'm not trying to knock the Wings, but you can do that and still come out in 7 games in overtime, like barely by the skin,
Right.
Not easiest thing.
And there was that play where the Red Wings, they're in the crease, like
Right,
3
exactly.
wings are in the crease.
That's I mean, and say what you want about that, that goal and whether or not it went in, but if it would have gone in, the Red Wings almost would have tied it. They had a couple chances, and it hit off a Blackhawk guy's shin right in front. I thought they were whacking away in overtime.
Right.
It was close. So that's the thing. At watching the series, I'm not confident. And you never know. The Blackhawks could just come out on fire with unprecedented momentum. But if you look at a team that has momentum, I think it's LA. They fought off the Sharks because of Quick. And I think they're going to do just enough to win. I almost want to pick them in 7, but I think like you, I never really pick series in 7 regardless. But I almost want to do it, but I think I'm also going to pick LA in 6, and I think it's going to be on the back, the pads of Jonathan Quick.
Right, and I think the key thing for Chicago to do is score 3 goals. I think if they score 3 goals, they win in any of the games. So if they can do that 4 times, then I think they win. But I don't think that you can do that to Jonathan Quick 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much how it is. But going on to the other finals in the Eastern Conference, the Bruins, my pick from the beginning of the playoffs to win the Stanley Cup,
very tough.
going up against Tim's Penguins.
Yep.
Penguins are the number 1 seed in the East.
Mm-hmm.
What are the Bruins, like 3rd?
4th.
4th.
Because they really, it's because of the way the divisions work.
Right.
Because, exactly.
So the Bruins escape against the Maple Leafs, mounting that comeback.
Right.
They advance, and then, they take care of business against the Rangers. And the Penguins beat the Islanders in what I thought was a really good series.
Yes, absolutely.
Against a team that, maybe kind of like the Red Wings, maybe shouldn't have done as well as they did, but the Islanders.
But like the Red Wings got hot.
Right.
And so maybe that number 17 wasn't as reflective of what they really were.
Right. So, the Islanders take the Penguins 6, but they dispatch of them and then pretty easily handle the Senators in 5 games. And just the one that they lost was, last second they tied up and then won it in overtime. So, I think that's going to be a good series also. But Tim will break it down more than I can because, I don't watch the Penguins all the time.
Right.
But I'm going to stick with my prediction from before the playoffs even started of taking the Bruins to win the Cup. So I'll take the Bruins in 7.
7 is obviously, I'm a Penguins fan. My name is Tim, and I'm a Penguins fan. You look at this series, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch because unlike maybe that Chicago-LA series where you might have, Quick pitching a shutout, you have 2 goalies in Thomas Vokoun and Tuukka Rask that aren't exactly world beaters. They're kind of veterans, journeymen that kind of move around, and they're solid, but they're not the best. You also look at who's going to show up and play in this series, and you have 6 of the top 10 guys so far in the playoffs in terms of points scored are either in Boston or Pittsburgh. They have a tremendous amount of firepower. The leading guy right now is David Krejci, who has 17 points so far. Right behind him is a guy named Evgeny Malkin, who has 16. Then Chris Letang has 16. Then Sidney Crosby has 15. And then Nathan Horton has 12. He was tied with Zetterberg so far. I think that this is going to be it's going to be a high-scoring series. Yeah, I mean, you never know. We might see Saturday night Vokoun stops 40 and Rask stops 45, and it's 1-0 in double overtime. But, I mean, when you have guys like Nathan Horton, who's an outstanding plus 14 on the Boston Bruins, it's incredible. You have guys like Evgeny Malkin, who's plus 3, and Chris Letang, who's plus 7. Crosby actually is a -1, but you talk about these guys who just have tremendous skill, and they pick up guys. The Boston only went out and picked up Jaromir Jagr, former Penguin, but a tremendously skilled, skater. Then you have Penguins pick up guys in Jarome Iginla, who's one of the best scorers in the past decade. I think that the series is just going to come down to really whoever gets to like 4 or 5 first. And I know that sounds kind of crazy to say, but the Penguins have proven they can do it, and Boston has proven it can do it. What worries me is Tuukka Rask is played pretty solid, and Boston has proven that, you talk about another cliche in fighting adversity. They completely saw it in coming back from 3 goals to beat Toronto and knock them off. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, kind of struggled with the Islanders. The Islanders had a lot of speed, which shockingly Boston does as well. And then they took it to 6 against a lesser team probably that they should have taken care of, further or quicker. Then they play Ottawa, who they matched up better with. Ottawa's hurt, and they made quick work of them, really. But I know this is going to shock you, but I think I'm gonna pick Boston in 6 because I think that Vokoun worries me. And I know he has numbers. He has a like 940 save percentage, and his numbers. It's they're not in the same ballpark, but he matches up with someone like Quick on paper right now in the playoffs. But he has not looked like Quick on the ice. Vokoun has given up some of these rebounds. Some barely are going in. There's been those instances where the puck gets by him, but a Penguins defenseman is right there with his stick. I've watched all the games practically, and that's what worries me. And I think that you might have an instance where Vokoun, maybe he gets like torched at, or something, and then all of a sudden, hey, now we're going to go to Fleury, who hasn't played in a month. So that's what worries me. Obviously, as a fan, I hope that Vokoun plays well enough, and I think the Penguins have the firepower to win, but I don't know if that back end, I kind of view that goalie as like their Achilles heel. Like, you have this great team on paper.
Well, and I even said that when they were making all these acquisitions. They get Jarome Iginla, they get the Brandon Morrow.
Yeah.
They make all these acquisitions, but they're all offense, right. And I know they picked up a defenseman, I think.
Yeah.
But it's offense, and what killed them last year in the playoffs?
Absolutely. It's
goaltending,
defense. And that's the thing. And, you look at some of their games they've won, and they finish it off, and they score 7 goals, but they still give up, you're like, really? Like, some of the goals they give up, and it's just like that. And, you can have a game like that Ottawa one that goes into double overtime where you're putting everything on net, and you just can't get it, and then the other team goes down there and scores on kind of not a fluke, but a great pass, and it just happens to slice through there, and then they win in double overtime. And I think we might see some games like that in this Boston game where either it's going to be like 6-5, or it might be like Pittsburgh I think Pittsburgh can outplay the Boston in in the neutral zone, and they can keep the puck down there. But you're going to have guys. You talk about their starts. You're going to have guys step up and be consistent, because Crosby's been consistent and Malkin has, and they've had their flashes of brilliance. But I look at guys like a James Neal, who really didn't show up, didn't have any goals. Then all of a sudden he has like 4 in 2 games, and they win those games, finish off the series. Jarome Iginla gets a couple assists. He had a point streak of like 6 games going on, but then he didn't show up at the beginning of the series. But then he has 2 goals as well in the final 2 games. They win those games. Those are guys that are going to need to step up. There's a reason you gave James Neal the contract you did. There's a reason Jarome Iginla, you picked him up at the deadline. Guys like Pasquale Dupuis are solid, and Crosby is. That's Crosby and Malkin are just world-class goal scorers, and I don't doubt they're going to do that. If one of them were to go down with an injury, I'd be worried. But they're staying consistent. You talk about like Pavel Datsyuk and stuff. I expect Crosby to like score at least 1 goal like every other night. I do, because he does, and he's been doing that. But these other guys are going to have to step up as well. And for the Penguins to win, Vokoun is going to have to be just like better than good, and he can't make mistakes, which he has. But the Penguins have bailed him out when you're scoring 5, 6, 7 goals.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. And I want relatively quick answers, because we got to get into the Tigers. So, do you think that there's going to be a reasonable comparison between this series with the Bruins and last year's series with the Flyers?
I think if we see it where it's like a 7-6 ball game and both goalies are playing bad, absolutely. And also,
what about physically? Because there was a lot of fights in that Flyers
series. Absolutely. With Pittsburgh, you can say whatever you want about Crosby, Malkin, or not being physical, but the Penguins have a lot of a physical nature on their team, a lot of players, and so does Boston.
Yeah, I mean Chara's the
well, yeah, Chara. So. I mean Chara, can just hip check you into next week, but they have some scrappy guys as well.
Right. Okay, and then the other one that I wanted to ask you is, do you think that Boston is a better team than Pittsburgh?
See, that's what I was telling you. I think that there's a reason the Penguins are the number 1 seed. The Penguins went 3-0 against Boston in the regular season, but that's when Fleury was playing well and Vaucoun was, that not that their goalies were not playing well, and it's easy to say that the Penguins should just win because they're the better team, and I ultimately I'm not trying to, but I think they are a better team, not just on paper, but in terms of skill. But it's not as huge a disparity as it was with Ottawa, or certainly not.
Well, I mean, when you're in the Eastern Conference Finals,
right? That's what I'm saying.
The other team's good too,
and that's what I'm saying. So when Ottawa's able to score 3 or 4 goals, but you score 6 or 7, that's what worries me, because Boston might be able to tack on 2 more, and then you're playing against a better team, if that makes sense. So Penguins fans are like, hey, and I know a lot of people are picking the Penguins, and a lot of Penguins fans are confident because they have this firepower, but I don't know if you're going to be able to match that against Boston.
So is Pittsburgh a better team?
I think they are.
Okay, but you think the matchup is
right? Exactly. And even though they went 3-0 in the regular season against them, I think that what really worries me is Vaucoun. That's what worries me, and or Fleury or whoever's playing back there. And if Vaucoun comes out, and I pray he does well, but if he doesn't, I think that's what's going to cost them, because I don't think they're going to be able to recover from him giving up 3, 4, 5 goals every game. And you just can't have that. You look at that Red Wings series, when they're giving up 3 or 4 goals, they're not winning games.
And if it comes to the point where they put Fleury back in,
that's a wild card,
and it'll be a clown show. It really would.
See, that's a wild card.
It's a distraction.
That's absolutely number 1. That's what worries. I would be so much more confident if Fleury was giving up 2 goals a game, but just being okay,
consistent.
Exactly, but he wasn't.
And if you take out a goalie, put him back in, take out a goalie, but it's the same thing that happens to the Canucks every year.
That's what I'm saying. That's why
it's a clown show, and it's a distraction.
It's in the back of my mind. Honestly, it's in the back of my mind. It's like, well, the Penguins are so good. They are. They're just incredibly good. They have more skill on one line than entire teams do. And I'm not trying to be this but they do. It's true. And firepower and all that. But I don't know. That's what worries. In the back of my mind, maybe that goalie situation isn't as solid. And in the playoffs, you have to have at least a consistent goaltender to win. And now, we've gotten through the first 2 rounds with not the most consistent goaltending. But now that you're in the Eastern Conference Finals and trying to go to the Stanley Cup Finals, this is where you have to have that in order to win.
Right. Okay. I think that's enough talk for the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. This has obviously been a very heavy hockey show today. But let's get into the Tigers for 6 minutes. Since we were last on, they played pretty well, I'd say. They win 2 games against Cleveland, in Cleveland. Nice city, by the way.
Yeah, great city.
And then they take 3 of 4 from Minnesota. They beat Pittsburgh in the first game of a home and home 2-game weird thing. And in Verlander,
it was his first start. He pitched 7 innings.
That's what I think we're gonna get into, is one of the Verlander starts. And then they lose in 11 innings to the Pirates 1-0. Mm-hmm. And then they lost at Pittsburgh last night, and then they're playing right now in the 9th inning, and it's 0-0. So
the offense is, for some reason, the Pirates are not really, or they're keeping them. Their pitching staff is really shutting down that Tigers.
Fister pitched really well tonight, but in Verlander's last start, it was a rain, or was that his last start?
Yeah, his last start was against Pittsburgh.
Was it the rain shortened one?
No,
that was against Cleveland.
Yes,
that's what I wanted to talk about.
And he came back out.
That's what I wanted to talk about. His start against Cleveland, it was the day we recorded last show.
It was 5 innings,
right?
And he came out after the rain, which was maybe 45 minutes.
Right.
And he came back out and finished the inning. And then he
pitched the 5th.
Right, he pitched the 5th, and then he was in line for the win.
Right.
Which he got.
And he got the win. So I like it from the standpoint of Verlander as a competitor, and he wants the win, especially after the 2 bad starts that he had prior to that. And the start that he had when he got that win wasn't exactly great, but he did get the win.
Right.
And it put him at 5-4. So that helps him out. And now he's 6-4 with the win against Pittsburgh, which he's dominated Pittsburgh and interleague play.
He's
in general.
20-2, yeah,
which is just
incredible.
ridiculous.
Or he's 22 not against the Pirates, against American or National League, 4-0 against the Pirates in his career.
Right, but the thing that I think it points to the most is that Jim Leyland is irrelevant to Justin Verlander. He will do whatever the heck he wants to do. And I had a conversation with somebody about when Verlander had that no-hitter going in like the 7th inning, and he was, had a pretty decently high pitch count. And, this guy was like, if he gets to 120 pitches and you're in the 8th, you pull him. And I said, absolutely not.
Right. It's funny. I was having a conversation with a different guy, a different friend, and he said that he honestly believed, and I thought he honestly believed that Leyland was hoping that Verlander would give up a hit because it would be a very controversial move if he's sitting at 140 pitches in the 8th inning and he takes him out.
There's no way that would happen, and I think that this rain-shortened comeback absolutely proves
It's a good
that.
point because and ultimately it didn't come to that
Right.
with the.
Right.
Because, if you're sitting there at 140, 150, then you're thinking about skipping your next start. You're thinking about, it's one thing to do with a guy and it's like maybe one of his career highlights. Hopefully Justin Verlander's career highlight is winning a World Series and getting the MVP.
Which he needs to do.
Right, absolutely. And that's a different topic for a different day. But, his career highlight is hopefully accepting a Hall of Fame pit or, bust or whatever
In
that they get.
Cooperstown.
Exactly. Not, if you're just kind of a random pitcher staying out there for a no-hitter. That's a prized arm and one of the best in baseball. But you're absolutely right because we both sat there, we're sitting in a restaurant and we're both like, oh, well, he's done. Right. Not coming out. And it's like, that's a shame. He's not going to get the win. And it was like these past couple starts have been, they're not like Verlander-esque, but they've been decent enough to kind of, pat down those worries that you had before. Right. And so, hopefully he's rounded back into shape, which is kind of weird for Verlander because you expect him to go out there 7-8 innings, 3 hits, 1 run, win. That's what you think. But, he's given up like a bomb in Cleveland and he comes back out. We're both like, what? And that's a risk of injury. That's why it never happens because the pitcher's not warmed up and all that. And you'd have to think maybe Leland's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't come back out there. Or maybe Leland, the way I imagine the conversation went was not that Leland's like, hey, you're not coming back out, but hey, how do you feel? Because that's how I feel. And Verlander's like, hey, I'm coming back out.
Right. I just don't think that Jim Leyland has the ability to control Justin Verlander because he's so competitive, he's so good, and he just does whatever the heck he wants. Right. If it's like if Jim Leyland was like, hey, you shouldn't eat Taco Bell, he'd be like, no. But I think that Jim Leyland is a good manager of the team because he manages the personalities, but he can't manage Justin Verlander.
Right, you never hear about like the Tigers having a rift in the clubhouse. There's never like fried chicken and rap music with the pitchers. There's never any of that. And the team always seems to, genuinely, at least, for the fans or for the media, want to support each other. There's never guys, talking bad about one another. You rarely see that because when you have a minor incident like that one relief pitcher talking bad about, right, it becomes a big story because there's nothing there really. Exactly. You don't have these rifts in the clubhouse.
Right. But, with the Red Wings being gone, with the Lions, not starting training camp till, July, August, and the preseason, and then the Pistons are pretty much irrelevant no matter what time of year it is. The Tigers are taking center stage in this city, and they really need to step up. They're sitting now at 28-20, I think.
Yeah,
29-22.
7 games. 7 games above 500.
Right. So, but it's time for them to turn it on, get way up there, and be the first place team that they're capable of being.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty much our show. Hockey heavy today, a little bit of Tigers at the end. But this is Sports Talk with Puckett and Pontzer. Thanks for listening.